Good evening to all of you for a very, very exciting session for our happy seniors. And as you can gather, the topic is really, really engaging. And I'm sure when you hear our guest speaker today, Ron Miller, you'll all sit back and start following what he's trying to do with you all. So the topic, of course, is senior fitness assessments. Uh, and that's something which I'm sure you must be waiting for bated breath and trying to find out what's going on, what more Ron has to tell us. And I would like to invite you, Sachin, to share your perspective about today's session and also introduce our wonderful speaker, Ron Miller. So over to you, Sachin.
Thank you, Som. So we have a very wonderful faculty today with us in our Happy Monday program. And he has a very deep background into the senior fitness assessments and also senior strength and conditioning, stretch and balance, healthy back, arthritis exercise programs. And the highlight of his theme is that senior assessments, the health assessments. And we know each other almost 2 decades and we worked in many of these facets. So I'm very, very happy to have a very esteemed faculty like Ron, who is not only dedicated, but also very skilled and working into this field as a service for many years, selflessly, and impacted so many people's lives. And we feel very fortunate to have him share all of his expertise and knowledge in this session. This is more like preview of what different facets he have. And also the important part in the senior age group is fall prevention, which also he has a lot of tips and ideas and skills into that field also. So here we go. I invite now Ron Miller. And Ron Miller, we are very grateful for you joining us in the Happy Monday program for today evening, and look forward to what you have to share with all of our friends and seniors. Thank you.
Nice introduction, and the music especially I enjoyed. Yeah. I think first of all, I should tell you a little bit more about who you're dealing with here. First of all, I am not a professional medical person at all. My background is in the humanities. My professional life was as an administrator in the computer game, providing computer services to libraries, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. And I intentionally left something out of my resume because I wanted to use it as a springboard. And that is one of the things that we did at the Y is we started a program with Stanford dealing with people with cancer recovery issues. We didn't take people with cancer. We were taking people with having gone through all the horrible stuff you have to go through to deal with cancer, namely chemotherapy, there's a number of other things you have to do, surgery, of course, and radiation. Those are the 3 big things to deal with. Well, the Stanford people discovered that if people exercised in a structured way on a regular basis over a measured period of time, 6 to 8 weeks, that they in effect accelerated their recovery significantly. That was the result of their research. So we joined with them and set up a regimen at the Y. Another staff member and I would take groups every 8 weeks, and we would do pre and post assessments. This means when they came in the door after having registered at Stanford, we would give them a series of physical tests to see what their level of activity was in those, and I'll go into those a little bit more. And then we would go through the prescribed exercise strategies that we worked out. And then at the end, we would give the same tests again and see if there's any difference. Almost universally, people accelerated their improvements and ended up actually, one of the big problems with cancer recovery is there's a mental attitude that makes you feel like you're no longer a whole human being. There's a lot of psychological issues associated with it, but doing the physical activity definitely helps overcome the mental negativity in most people, not in all people, but in most people. So I needed to bring that up because the dimension of assessment, and I realized senior fitness assessment is not a dramatic phrase at all. I can't imagine that phrase would be something, oh my God, I'm really looking forward to that. No, it's a very, it's an interesting process to go through, I have to say, as a person who takes the assessment, but it's just such a dry sounding activity. But it's important. I'm so grateful to be here, incidentally, because I feel kind of exposed to people. I don't know who you are. I see no faces. It's like talking to a blank wall. It's a way of kind of exposing myself, as it were, but it means I'm alive. It creates strange feelings when you don't have feedback from the people you're talking to. So the things that I mentioned about this cancer program, which was called Living Strong, Living Well, and I, incidentally, being myself a cancer survivor, could relate to them very intimately, probably more so than people who were teaching such things and otherwise eventually, who hadn't passed through this ordeal of fire of cancer recovery. The dimension I was mentioning is that the assessment is done in two parts to be useful. It actually has two dimensions. One is how you compare with other people, your age and gender, and how you compare with yourself sometime in the future or sometime in the past. The people at California State University, Fullerton, in their senior fitness department, they devised a test and debugged it. It was a PhD program. They really did a good job, and they devised a fitness assessment, which is what I adopted at the Northwest YMCA. Now, what kinds of things did they measure? Well, measure upper body strength, lower body strength, flexibility of your body, endurance, how well you could do something over a sustained period of time, how your balance was, standing on one foot for a length of time, for instance, and also checking height and weight. These were all recorded for each person that participated in the assessment. We kept records of that, and at the end of the 8 weeks, we did it all again, and it had 2 columns of results, and you could see the difference between them. Even with people who occasionally couldn't attend the exercise regimen that we had set up, they showed improvement as well. But those who stuck with it all the way through, did it regularly, showed marked improvement. And the assessments that we got at the end of us, not of them, but the assessments of the program were almost universally positive. So it's an experience, I think. You don't have to have cancer to do this. The assessments that I did at the Y for many, many years, I guess we went through 300-400 people. We're all seniors, and they had to start at 55 years old, all the way up. I had people that were 98, with I think the oldest we had. And I did it every 6 months for a number of years so that people could take it and then do whatever they were going to do for 6 months and see whether they improved or not. Now, one thing I have to say is the older we get, the harder it is to stay fit and to stay well, as many of you probably already know. So it's an accomplishment after a 6-month period not to have improved, but not to have degraded, because the natural tendency of the body at rest is to degrade. Movement is the nourishment of stability, strength, and wellness. That's the big thing, movement of one kind or another, and we prescribe these things. So I tell people now, I have 3 classes that I teach that are for seniors, that I don't, they're not associated with why, and they're free. The goal is to feel good, because the older you get, generally speaking, it's really hard to keep up when you're afflicted with things like recurring arthritis and other things that are just annoying. So that's part of our process of growing old successfully, is to not let that stuff get to us so that it becomes a rolling snowball and turns your life into negativity. So the specific assessment moves I can describe, since I don't have graphics made for you. But to do upper body assessment, one of the things we did was to lift weights. I can kind of demonstrate some of these things. We use a bicep and hold a 5-pound weight and move it up and down like this as quickly as you can for 30 seconds. Now, let's say one day I do 20 of these with a 5-pound weight like that. You pick the arm that you think you're strongest on, and it's symptomatic of upper body strength. There are other muscles in your upper body, all right, but this movement was deemed by the people at California State University, Fullerton, to be symptomatic of the rest of your body strength in your upper body. 6 months from now, if you could do 20 and you were, say, 85, you did damn well. If you were started at 40 and then you did it when you were 40, you should have improved to 30, because you can develop muscle strength and movement much easier at 40 than you can at 80. It's really hard to develop new muscle after 65 or so. In my own case, I like to say, I was probably in the best physical shape of my life when I was about 67, 68. Because when I was younger, I smoked a lot. I drank probably too much. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I drank too much. I didn't exercise particularly, but I wasn't standing around either. I was busy. I was a manager. I wore a shirt and tie, office stuff, which means you don't do a whole lot of exercising. And I, at that time, I did not work out in addition to going to the job. So the older you get, the harder it is. And if you stay even, it's an accomplishment. Now that was the upper body. The lower body was a very simple one, and you can do any of these yourself at home. Is standing up in a chair and doing it as quickly as you can for 30 seconds. Some people can do 2, some people can do 10. It depends what shape you're in and how good your legs are. Other things dealt with flexibility, and this particular test was you sat in a chair, your legs were straight out. I'd have to adjust the camera to show this. And you reach down and try and touch your toe, but you keep your legs straight. That's the clue. How close you get to your toe is the measure. Like this is 2 inches. Some people can go, let's say this is your toe, and this is your hand going towards your toe. Some people can get this close. Some people can get that close. They can actually go beyond it. It depends on the flexibility associated with your hip area. You can improve if you start out this way and you do stretching exercises. You can increase the flexibility of your middle body. And that's just those muscles. There's obvious flexibility and muscles. Every muscle stretches and every muscle can increase the distance it can stretch, and that lends stability to the rest of your body. It means you can react to imbalances quicker, and if you're caught about to fall, you can recover easier. So supple muscles are the best defense against falling. That and your sense of balance, which is in your brain, in your semicircular canal. Endurance was standing up and walking in place as many steps as you can over a 2-minute period. And some people cannot make it for 2 minutes. They have to sit down. They're starting at a low area. And this probably means they don't do a lot of walking in their lives. There are other people that set up a regimen of walking every day, which is excellent. Some people walk slowly. Walking the dog is a good start. Some people walk quickly. Some people jog. I recommend at this juncture, if you can do it, is you walk fairly steadily, and then every so often you jog a few steps. The classic example of this is called Scouts pace, Boy Scouts pace, Girl Scouts pace. And it means 25 walking steps followed by 25 jogging steps followed by 25 walking steps. And the goal was to do a mile in 6 minutes, a mile in 12 minutes, I guess it is, now that I think about it. Whereas otherwise, it takes you 20 minutes to go a mile. 3 miles an hour is a mile every 20 minutes. But if you do that kind of pacing, you can cut that time in half. And you can go for a long distance because you rest between exertions. So that's a good way to build endurance. Balance, of course, lots of things can affect balance. You can probably think of some. If this was interactive now, I would ask, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? So think and see if we miss any. One is medications, primary anti-inflammatory medications, any kind of psychedelic medication or drug, things that involve anything that affects the brain, like trying to overcome depression. These can all affect your balance because your balance is mainly up here, plus a good muscle structure and nothing painful. Arthritis is a minor issue in this case. So stretching and balance go hand in hand, as it were, because to stretch, you're improving the ability of your muscles to maintain your balance. And of course, height and weight. Whenever one goes to the doctors, they usually do a height and weight check. In my case, height and weight was rather significant. When we hit, or the change in height and weight was relatively significant. When you hit late 70s or so, maybe even earlier, maybe a little later, your spine shortens because between each vertebra in your spine is a disc, and this disc is keeps the bones from rubbing against each other. You have them in your knees. Practically every joint has some version of this. It looks like a very tiny toilet seat, some people have said. But what makes the thickness of that disc, of that washer between your discs, is moisture. And as we get older, we tend to dehydrate because we don't drink enough fluid. It's a hard thing to drink the classic 8 glasses of water a day. You really have to work at it. It's not something that is pleasurable for a lot of people. And you try to substitute, like I drink a lot of coffee thinking this is the same thing as drinking water. It's not quite, but it's close. So I make up for it that way. So when you dehydrate these discs, this means they lose a little bit of thickness. In my case, I used to be dead on 6 feet tall. I am now 5'10". 10 1/4 because of the narrowing of these discs in various joints that are part of my height. And I suspect everybody goes through this, but it shouldn't plummet. It should be a gradual activity, and it's a signal, more fluid. Weight, in my case, since I had cancer, and I had cancer of the stomach, so I had my stomach removed, I have trouble absorbing nutrients. It's called nutritional, I forgot, I should know it, but my body does not absorb nutrients from food because my stomach doesn't have the acid anymore to digest it. So I have to take a whole bunch of pills that make believe in my intestine that my stomach is digesting food. I take enzyme pills. This means my weight dropped from 185 to 130 in the space of about a month and a half. Anybody who has any surgery in their gastrointestinal area and they have to remove anything in that long 26-foot pathway that food travels while it's being digested and converted into waste products, if you don't take food efficiently and you don't have the right kind of mix of nutrients, it's called malabsorption. That's the word I was looking for, which means your body isn't nourished like it used to be. The first thing that goes, you'll be pleased to know, is fat. It's not a good idea to get a total gastrectomy to lose weight, I have to advise. So don't think of that as a way out. At this point, I'd like to sort of mention a yin-yang quality about some of the things that are healthy. I mentioned a lot of people worry about weight gain. They're on constant diets. In my case, I've lost so much weight, I have to worry about weight gain, which is to say, I cannot lose any more weight or I'll get sick. I have to eat stuff that has a lot of protein in it, even fat. So the prescription is I can eat pretty much anything I want to because I'm not trying to lose weight like most people do. Another yin-yang, which can go either way, is high blood pressure and low blood pressure. In my case, I have low blood pressure. I took atorvastatin or Lipitor, which a lot of people prescribed to keep your cholesterol manageable under 200, I think it used to be. Mine is so low, they don't know quite what to do. So they said, take the Lipitor to keep your, to try to keep your arteries from clogging, but don't take too much because we don't want your low cholesterol to get lower. So I'm fighting to try to keep it up. One cardiovascular surgeon that I was dealing with, he says, you need to eat more pretzels, more salt, all the stuff that everybody else is told never touch because I need the opposite effect. So those are examples, but I say, depending on what your issue is, this determines the kind of exercise and the kind of behavior a pre and post assessment would do. Now, if I had taken a pre-assessment before my surgery and another one 6 months after my surgery, it'd be radically different. Oh my God. It would be so different, it would be invalid because we wouldn't be dealing with the same muscle mass. Because after fat, after your body uses all the fat, it starts working on the muscle. And at the same time, it starts working on bone. So all of these depletions contribute to weight loss and contribute to thinness. It used to be thought of if you're really thin, you're healthy. Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But for me to do an assessment now, I'm probably stable enough that I could do it, but it would be nowhere close to where I used to be when I was in shape. Comparing me when I was 65 now is like two different people. Okay, I mentioned that I'm teaching some classes now, and there are 3 of them that I work on, aside from a poetry group. The classes are senior strength and conditioning. They go for an hour twice a week. 2 of them I do outside in a park, have about 14 to 16 people. And the middle of the week one is a Zoom class, which means we're not limited, as you all understand, by geographic proximity to where the class is taught. And COVID has taught a lot of us how to deal with remote learning of various kinds. And some of us actually like it better than the in-person stuff, not the least of which it cuts down on traffic. It cuts down on transportation time lost getting to and from wherever you're doing your thing. And the other thing is, of course, you don't have to wear shoes if you don't want to, if you're doing a Zoom class in your own home. This, in effect, is my studio for my exercise Zoom class for seniors. In these classes, I combine what I was just saying this assessment covers: flexibility, strength, relaxation, which I learned from Sachin. I tack on the end. I can't call it meditation because it's not long enough, but I use the techniques of meditation to at least get in 10 minutes of very intense relaxation by using a 2-part mantra. And it seems to work pretty well. At least I'm told that by anecdote. I don't measure heart rate at the beginning of a meditation and at the end of it. So I'd prefer, if we can, to deal with questions at this point. We're almost there anyway. There are other things I could cover, but I'm not quite sure what people are interested in. Just know that I'm a very informal kind of guy, and I have had a lot of experience. I'm no longer affiliated with Y. The classes I teach are voluntary, but I require people who are in my classes to make donations to one of 2 foundations. One is Doctors Without Borders, and the other one is Amnesty International. So if they do that, they can be in the group. So, and I don't check up on them, but I do get reports from Amnesty when somebody makes a donation, and also from doctors sometimes. So it's my way of multiplying the contribution to those 2 very valuable worldwide foundations that improve people's lives. So I hope this has been useful, and I look forward to your questions.
So Ron, you are coming at a very wonderful right time for me. So yes, I am a senior. Yes, this month I will be 78.
Good for you.
Yes, at age 65, I was very ill. But then I corrected myself, lost 90 pounds. And after that, everything improved. So I take no medication except thyroid. So all my medicines are gone, no diabetes, no nothing.
Terrific.
But what is happening is what you're talking about. I have become much more active than I ever was, maybe too active. So
no such thing.
So that's what I was hoping you would say. But what is happening is, somehow or the other, it seemed to hurt my lower back. So just, and maybe I overdid it, just 3-4 days ago, I'd gone for a hike with my friends, did 14,000 steps. By the time I came home, I discovered that some close family death in Atlanta. So I ran there. And during that stress or whatever, I caused a lot of spasm in my body. So I have very difficult time right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like I may have overdone it. Is that correct? Or Is there something else?
I missed one word. Ordinate, what
Or
Yes,
did
yes,
it?
overdone.
could be? Yes. When you hurt your, first of all, over 85% of the population, at least in the United States, I can't speak for other parts of the world because there are racial differences in how people's bodies react to things, especially in Asia. Osteoporosis is very different in Asia than it is in the United States, for instance. The pain in one's back many times is not diagnosed correctly, but it usually comes from a quick movement when your body is not ready for it. Namely, the muscles have not been relaxed enough to absorb the sudden shock. This is what I was meaning. Doing stretching and balancing prepares the body to take shock a little better. The other thing is pain can be produced in a number of ways, but in my field, we usually talk about muscles, ligaments, and tendons. We're not into bone marrow cancer and things of that sort. We're just not equipped. We're not trained in that kind of medicine. So tendons, for instance, which are not very flexible, but when they get hurt, they take a long time to recover. And by getting hurt means that they're stressed apart quickly and beyond their normal short range of movement. There's lots of interesting tendons around your knees to keep your legs on straight. That's where typically people find a lot of problems. But the same thing is true around any bone alignment issues, and that's certainly true with the spine as well. So there are lots of things that traditionally goes on. If you go to a doctor, an osteopath, for instance, who specializes in bone issues, they might take an x-ray just to see if you've chipped anything or if there's a misalignment. Chiropractors do the same thing. Chiropractors might come to a conclusion that you're misaligned and they can knock a tendon, knock a vertebra slightly this way or that way and actually help people. People are sometimes skeptical of chiropractors, but some are very good and some have been known to help people do that. There's also physical therapy that people are routinely prescribed for back issues. It might help for a while, but it involves stretching, probing, pushing, hauling, but not much. They don't do much with diet in these areas. That's the weak spot in the whole thing. Diet takes a long time to have an effect, either negatively or positively. I mean, just imagine how diet can affect your fingernails, for instance. It would take forever. Or your hair. That's why a lot of these medications that are sold to strengthen your fingernails, they might take a couple of months to have any noticeable effect. And in the meantime, you say they don't work. Well, sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. So I can't tell you, I can't prescribe to you what you should do for your back since I really don't know what the problem is. And even if I did, I might not be able to. But the obvious choice here is to pick your medication, Eastern or Western, or a blend of the two, and stick with it. But don't expect that. Be surprised if it works, because a lot of times you have to just learn to endure it. And that's not a nice thing to hear, but it sounds to me like you did something abrupt and that it is recoverable, that you haven't done anything that's permanent.
So Dr. Ron Miller, I must tell you that I'm lucky that my physician is believer in lifestyle medicine, Dr. Pankaj Vej, who is the co-founder of this thing. So I had a video visit with him. He arranged for everything. So he says, check out chiropractor.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
and,
chiropractors.
And he's arranging for physical therapy.
Yeah.
So these are the two things. But unfortunately, neither he or I wanted to take some medicine, but it got so bad I couldn't even get up. So
Yeah.
they did give me for 5 days some
Pain relief.
medicine,
Yeah.
cortisone, which I didn't want to take,
Right.
but unfortunately I took.
Well, chiropractic and physical therapy, many times the two skills have the same office and they refer to each other. A good chiropractor gets probably more people with back problems than any other problem. Sometimes they can help, sometimes they can't, but it's worth a try.
So
Other
there's no
people have
harm in
tried.
it.
Other people have tried acupuncture. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's one of those things, like I said, 5% of the population has back issues, and a high percentage of those are not diagnosed correctly because the symptoms are so masked by the complex of the spine that sometimes it just has to work its way out. But rest is the other prescription. And to be sure that if you sleep on your back, that you have a pillow behind your knees so that your lower back curvature is supported more in the bed. Another thing you can do is take a towel and roll it from the ends, a hand towel, and then put that towel behind your back with the rolls on either side of your spine when you're lying on your back, and lie on something hard. That's kind of a shiatsu effect. That's the Japanese technique for massage, but it's just one thing. It's supporting either side of the spine and has a tendency to help straighten it. So those are the only two things. And I'm really just giving you ideas. I'm not prescribing for your particular situation because I am not qualified to prescribe anything.
Thank you, Ron. That's pretty amazing. We understand on this platform that it's not for individual advice, and so everybody knows that part of it. There are wonderful questions already coming in for you. And the first question I see is, do you have any tips for osteoarthritis?
Be glad it's not rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
Be glad it's not lupus. All of those are variations of arthritis. There's over 100 different kinds of arthritis if you really get into it.
Right.
Osteoarthritis is a mystery. A lot of people have it and they have to put up with it, and they get into the habit of taking painkillers to deal with it, but that doesn't solve the problem. It masks the problem. Osteoarthritis is dealing with joints, usually in the hands and feet, but it can be elsewhere. It can be in the spine. Then it's really terrible. But I tend to think, first of all, there's no cure that I'm aware of, or boy, everybody would know what it is.
So maybe you can give generic tips in the terms of the arthritis, and you can combine it with the osteoporosis, because that's another question.
Okay. All osteo means bone, and anything, the itis means inflammation of, and porosis means depletion of mass in this case. Usually a loss of calcium, a loss of other minerals in the bone, and it means your predilection to break bones and to fall are increased when you have osteoporosis. Osteopenia is just before the measurement of osteoporosis. If you're tending toward osteoporosis, namely brittle bones, you have to be very, very careful, because what happens here is people fall and the first thing that breaks is either a wrist or a hip, and those are terrible. Anything that affects your ability to walk is one of the worst things that can happen to us as we get older, or any time, because that is how we get around. Once you cannot walk, you have to be dependent on other people. And that is something that is really scary, unless you live in a household of people that are just waiting to help you. And that's rare. And as far as arthritis is concerned, I have no cure, obviously. Heat tends to help. Aspirin helps some. NSAIDs help some. Some people are allergic to NSAIDs, so you have to get something stronger. You can only mask it. The other thing is that sometimes you get, so your joints lock, like a finger will be in this, it's called trigger finger. The best way around that is to just straighten it out. But it really means the cartilage or those discs, like I mentioned before, has either gotten brittle or non-existent, and the bones lock in various positions. The typical treatment for that initially is cortisone and eventually surgery. And what they do with surgery, they may insert a fake piece of cartilage. They can do that now, especially in knees. It works for a bit, but arthritis is chronic. As far as I know, there is no cure, unfortunately. It's a royal pain. That's the best I can say. But if you exercise and move, if you do stretching and keep the joints mobile, it tends to produce fluid. It tends to draw fluid to the joint and prevent the severity and prevent the rapidity of arthritis's bad development.
You can steer it to give us some takeaway tips for an individual who is gracefully aging and may have minor issues of aches, pains, and how can they do self-assessment for themselves, and maybe how can they integrate and mainly sustain their activity?
Well, one is to follow an assessment regimen like I described, but I didn't have a list to give you, or there are descriptions. And if you do that today, and if you do it, and if you exercise in the interim and do it 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now and see whether it's improved or not. Generally speaking, though, we kind of know just by walking upstairs. Gee, I used to be able to go up 2 at a time. Now I can't. That was a while ago. But just if you live in a house, if you're fortunate enough to live in a house with stairs, because that means you have to exercise whether you like it or not. I'm fortunate enough to live, just try to go from the top to the bottom, time how long it takes you. Then give yourself an interim and then see how fast you can do. I'm assuming you have no cardio problems. You haven't had atrial fibrillation or a heart attack or stroke or anything. See how fast you can go up. Write that down somewhere on the wall or on a piece of paper, and then see a month from now whether there's a difference. If you haven't done anything, if you just sat on your butt for a month, guaranteed you can't do it better. It would take you a longer time. But if you move around, if you walk up and down stairs, my brother, who was 102, would conscientiously walk up and down stairs 6 times every day. And he was amazing. I mean, he had quadruple bypass, but that wasn't because he couldn't walk. It was because his heart was clogged. So, but nevertheless, that's little games you can play with yourself to prove to yourself you're either getting better or worse. And if you have the guts to take some form of positive action to overcome it. But it's hard because our natural predilection is not to do it.
Right, means we promote the idea that motion is new lotion.
Yes, that's exactly right. So
keep moving, yeah. So now, will you show some maybe self-assessment tricks for people, like maybe 2, 3 ideas to take, like practical tips they can do on their own at home, just like.
Well, I'll give you 3 things to do.
Yeah.
I mentioned them already. Most important one, cross your arms, sit in a chair. Don't let your back touch the chair. No arms on the chair. Stand up all the way and sit down. See how many you can do in 30 seconds. Write it down. That is the best example of how well your legs are doing.
Right.
The next one is the stretch. And I'm going to try to see if I can get the camera. Put one leg out straight, with both hands, one on top of the other, and reach down, keeping your leg straight to see how close to your toe you can get.
Mhm.
I don't know whether you can see that. Yeah, I guess you can get the idea. You don't have to do it on both sides. Just pick the leg you want to do and be sure you cross your hand, one on top of the other, and one hand isn't further away than the other. Make an estimate as to how close you are to your toe. If you can
Right.
touch your toe, it's a 0. If you can go past your toe an inch, it's a 1. If you
Mhm.
can't make it to your toe an inch, it's a -1. So you
Right.
can do this little code trick to give you an idea of how your lower body flexibility is doing. The other one is, I already showed you, it's trying to find something that's 5 pounds. Incidentally,
Like
I recommend a weight like this. This is a flexible weight, and it's called an ankle weight because it's usually wrapped around your foot. But you can put it together and wrap it around your hand and use it just as easily. So it works both ways. These are for the exercise part that I was just describing. This thing has pockets in it. And in each pocket is a piece of steel. And each piece of steel weighs a certain amount. So you can get up to 5 pounds or 1 pound variation on these things. They're called ankle weights. And they wrap around your ankle. That's what they're designed for. So you can use those to exercise. Exercise is what you do after you take the assessment. So for a woman, 3 pounds. How fast you can do it in 30 seconds. This, I think, is probably now, this is probably 2 pounds now. So you go as fast as you can for 5 seconds and count how many times you do it. For a man, it should be 5 pounds. The testers at California State University, Fullerton, determined that the muscle mass generally in men is larger than the muscle mass in women. So they tried to counter the difference by having different resistances as part of the test. This is a measure of your upper body strength. There are lots of things associated with upper body strength, but that is a symptom. What's happening here is the bicep muscle is contracting. But there are tons of other muscles in the shoulders, the neck, lower back, outside of your arm. But this is one you can't do all. You can't assess all of them. You can't lift 10-pound weight with your finger and then another finger. Why waste all that time when you can just get it with one symptom? So those 3 things, there are others, of course, but those 3 things would get you on the road.
Excellent. And how many rounds you recommend to do the,
Pardon me?
how many rounds one should do? So when
For
you
the
do
test?
with the weight in the palms,
Well, I was doing the assessment. I wasn't
Yeah.
doing exercise. Exercise is very different. Exercise, first of all, you do both hands at
no,
once.
but
probably.
for the assessment, is there any specific number or criteria to look at?
Oh, to find out whether you're normal
Yeah.
or not?
Yeah.
There are, CSU Fullerton has determined there's a range for each age group. The problem is that the CSU Fullerton people no longer offer this test. I've got their book, but they won't do any analysis of the data or anything like that. So
Oh,
in
no.
effect, when I left the Y, they quit doing it. I don't think there was a correlation, but the 2 things happened at once. I apologize for that, but I was speaking of longitudinal, namely comparing yourself with yourself in the future, rather
Right.
than comparing yourself with everybody else in the United States that is in the sample group. You can live without that, but you can't live without comparing your own. Your own progress or lack thereof. That's far more important information than knowing whether you're better or worse than 40% of the population. I don't think that matters much.
That's wonderful. So thank you very much, Ron.